we are Anchor. You can support us with the Super Thanks button below.
A ghost is haunting Europe, the ghost of communism. This phrase was coined by the famous philosopher Karl Marx in 1848 and became one of the world's most important predictions. In those days, it was very difficult to predict the rapid spread of communism in Europe, but Marx's words soon came true. Communist movements gained strength in Europe, and major uprisings broke out in many countries. And today, a ghost is haunting Russia, the ghost of freedom. And this ghost is raising the possibility that the protests in Russia could turn into a massive uprising. The latest news from Russia contains many clues. The riots in Russia could spell the end of Putin's political career, and this could be one of the critical events that change world history. Tensions are very high in Russia, and the people want things to change. But what exactly is happening in Russia, and how could these riots play out? As Anchor Daily News Team, we closely follow the protests in all the cities of Russia and the social-political debates of Russia. In this article, we have compiled all the developments and possible outcomes for you. If you are ready, let's get started. First of all, the specter of freedom circulating in Russia is very important. All Eastern countries, Russia in particular, have repressive governments. These rulers do not apply democratic rules and put pressure on the media. The activities of civil society organizations, universities, and independent journalists are restricted. Restrictions on people's way of life are increasing. But this situation has started to change in recent years. Especially with the development of technology and the establishment of new communication networks, repressive regimes have become completely helpless. People expressing their opinions on social media started to criticize the rulers. Independent journalists have also become more active through social media. The Russian people have been very affected by this process. The Russian people, especially those communicating through Telegram groups, started to realize Putin's lies. Many news that never appeared in the Russian press appeared on social media. Russian people also organized anti-war protests on social media. There were many protests every day in Moscow and St. Petersburg. The Russian police used violence to suppress these riots, and thousands of activists were detained. But the Russian people never gave up. The number of anti-Putin protesters in Russia is growing every day. This also affects political choices in Russia. Putin has been pressuring an anti-Western policy since he took office. He is also trying to make the Russian people hostile towards the West. But the Russian people have realized that Putin is lying and now want to be a Western country. As you know, the war and rivalry between the Eastern and Western countries has been going on since World War I. Russia is considered the most powerful country of the Eastern Bloc. Putin has always seen the West as the enemy and has escalated this rivalry. But young people in Russia don't want war anymore. That's why they want better relations with democratic Western countries. This could lead to a huge change in Russia's history. This change in Russia could be a milestone for world politics. If Russia decides to establish good relations with the West, the Eastern Bloc will be completely collapsed. As a result, conflicts and wars in many parts of the world would end. The demand of young people in Russia could lead to peace in the whole world. But it is not so easy. Russian President Putin is doing everything he can to keep his power. That is why he is trying to suppress the protests in Russia. The Russian people continue to revolt despite Putin's repression. The riots in Russia have increased more recently. The biggest reason for this is the increasing death toll in the Russian army. About 200,000 soldiers had died in the Russian army. The Russian army is suffering one of the biggest defeats in history. The success of the Ukrainian army in this war is being followed with interest by the whole world. The Ukrainian army has managed to establish a huge superiority over the Russian army. The Russian army lost power on all fronts of the war. Russia had to withdraw from most of the territories it occupied. The Ukrainian army has also announced a new operation to liberate the whole country. This statement has caused panic in Russia. Because everyone knows that the Russian army cannot win this war, they are worried that more Russian soldiers will die in the offensive launched by the Ukrainian army. The Russian people now think that it is necessary to withdraw from Ukraine as soon as possible. Especially the families of the soldiers are calling for the Russian army to leave Ukraine. Russian people are chanting slogans during protests in many Russian cities, including Moscow. A group gathered in Moscow today said, "Peace now, now." The success of the Ukrainian army in this war is increasing the fear of the Russian people. The Russian people know that the Russian army must withdraw so that no more soldiers die. Because Ukrainian President Zelensky has also made a statement on this issue. Zelensky said that these operations will continue vigorously until the entire territory of Ukraine is liberated. Everyone saw that Zelensky never gives up. The Kremlin leaders panicked after these statements. Kremlin leaders thought Zelensky would give up, but Zelensky has been bravely defending his country since the beginning of the war. Zelensky has never accepted surrender and is doing his best to liberate all occupied territories. Zelensky's determination is also affecting the Ukrainian army. Ukrainian soldiers continue to fight bravely to the end of Russian occupation. The Russian army suffers hundreds of casualties on the battlefield every day. Seeing hundreds of soldiers dying every day, the Russian people are organizing more protests to end the war. The Kremlin leaders see both the Ukrainian army and the protesters in Russia as enemies. But they are not succeeding against either. The more the Ukrainian army increases its operations, the more the Russian people demand peace. According to experts, this process completely severed the emotional bond between the Russian people and Putin. The Russian people thought that they had a very strong ruler. However, seeing that Putin was helpless against Zelensky, the Russian people experienced a great disappointment. The Russian people now realize that enmity with the West is useless. That's why they want to have good relations with the West and live freely. The demand for freedom in Russia is growing every day. Moreover, in the states that are part of the Russian Federation, these demands are increasing even more. Many countries, such as Bashkortostan and Chechnya, want to gain their independence from Russia. The Russian Federation may disintegrate as a result of this process. Experts who study Russia believe that the Russian Federation will undergo a major change in the future and will lose power. This process will accelerate if the Russian people manage to start a huge revolt. The Russian people can change world history. What do you think about the uprisings in Russia? How do you think they will affect the course of the war? Are the Eastern regimes collapsing? Is it possible to achieve peace in the whole world as a result of this process? Don't forget to share your views with us. Follow us for more updates.
All rights to these videos belong to Anka Daily News YouTube channel. Our Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook usernames are @AnkaDailyNews. Do not rely on any other social media publications. We legally fight all websites and channels that use it without our permission.